What is going on, gunfighters? Saddle up for Gunfighter Life, where we talk about guns, gunfighting, with God at the center, and Judeo-Christian values, perspective, and worldview. Today, we get into some deep theological stuff sometimes and tactics. Today is going to be a lighthearted gun chat about the most iconic American guns. Make America great again? How about make America godly again and well-armed again? We're kind of known throughout the world, right, as a nation of guns and gunmen. And I think that's a good thing. Let's keep it up. Let's talk about some of the most iconic guns of America. With that, I'm going to plug in the bio. Then we'll get into the topic. So, who am I? Who is this person talking to you from across the internet? Why should you listen? First and foremost, I am a Christian, a servant of God, and a follower of Jesus Christ. God has blessed me to do many things in my life, for I could do nothing apart from Him. U.S. Marine Corps combat veteran, did a couple of tours in Iraq. As an assaultman after my combat tours, I was an urban warfare instructor for the Marine Corps under Mojave Viper. Also served in the U.S. Army, both full-time and part-time National Guard. Also did several years in law enforcement, LAPD. I worked regular assignments and more specialized assignments. Been a private contractor for a 3-letter government agency. That's all I'll say about that. Been blessed to be a state rifle and pistol champion and West Coast regional rifle champion. Won more shooting competitions with the talent that God's given me than I can actually remember. Was blessed to be the commander of a tactical team in a large metropolitan area. Our primary job, the reason we primarily existed, was to stop active shooters. I got the opportunity to head up and be the commander of that team. I grew up around guns, hunting and shooting and competing at a very early age. Been blessed to hunt all over this beautiful country, from whitetail on the East Coast to mule deer on the West Coast, and bear and elk and all manner of things. I've even been a professional big game hunter and guide. But again, most importantly, I'm a Christian. And I am your host, Michael Milito. Welcome to the podcast. Most iconic American guns. Like, you just see them, you think America, American gun. We're going to start off with one, the M1, the M1 Garand. M1 Garand, the rifle in many an American hand when it stormed the beaches of Normandy, when it took place in all number of battles of World War II. Pretty much every other nation, their main arm was a bolt-action rifle. Like a lot of people that aren't gun people, you could put a 98K, a Mosin Nagant, one of the British Enfields on a table, and they wouldn't really be able to tell what nation they were from. Again, unless they were gun people. You might be able to. But the average person on the street, the average person that's even semi into history, you hold up an M1 Garand and they'd probably know that's the gun we used in World War II. At least I'd like to think that. It's iconic American. A time in America where we made stuff on our own, and we made it well, out of wood and steel. Back when America still produced that kind of stuff, that quality, that quantity, when we were a nation of men who built stuff, M1 Garand kind of embodies that, and it's iconic American. I don't think anybody can argue that the M1 is not an iconic American weapon. Now let's talk about the 1911. The M1 Garand served us well in World War II. The 1911 served us well in World War I. Think about that. 1911. It was designed for a time when we used cavalry, and not like air cavalry with helicopters or tank cavalry, when we had horse cavalry. 1911. Designed by John Browning. Just so far ahead of its time, it's still relevant today. I just did an episode, just coincidentally, not thinking about this episode because I hadn't come up with the idea yet, of the 1911 for the modern gunfighter. It served us in World War I. It served us in World War II. In Korea. In Vietnam. Wasn't replaced until the 80s. Think about that. From 1911 until the 80s. And that was as a mass issue. I'm sure they kicked around in inventory quite a bit longer than that. Some specialized units have used them. If they don't still use them, they used them up until just a few years ago. M45, direct lineage. Perhaps it might be, sadly, the last American military adopted 1911 by the U.S. Marine Corps. A fantastic gun. It's powerful, it's semi-automatic, it's so good, plenty of people still choose to use it today. I didn't always, I'll be honest, when I was the commander of a tactical team and I could pick my weapons, but oftentimes I did choose either an STI 2011, direct lineage of that, or that M45, because mission dependent, that's what I wanted. And I thought it was a good tool for the job. It's still relevant. It's still an amazing and effective handgun, even today. And you think about it, came out in 1911, and it's iconic. It is iconic. Also, the cartridge it comes in, the 45 ACP. When a lot of these other European countries were messing around with 32 autos and 380 ACP, and the Germans, which to be fair proved to be a really good cartridge, the 9mm, we had the big old honkin' 45. A lot of other countries, I think, in those time periods treated a handgun as a badge of rank or an authority kind of thing. We viewed it as a weapon of war and a war-fighting tool and implement. Verify this for yourself, but I believe that the story goes we had a different weapon and we thought we want something more effective at fighting. Hence, the 1911 came to be. It was designed to fight. It wasn't designed as a badge of rank. It wasn't designed to be worn on the hip as a decoration. It was designed to wage war. And that kind of embodies kind of the American fighting spirit, right? Classic, iconic American 1911. Now, I'm not going to list every American service rifle on here because I don't think some are iconic. If you held up a 30-40 Krag, I don't think most people that aren't gun nerds would know what that was, even though it was a U.S. Army issued rifle. But I do think there is something quintessentially modern American about the M16, A1, and A2 and the AR-15 variants of it with the carry handle and that triangle front sight, that classic guys that, right, you just see a silhouette of a man carrying a rifle with a carry handle and that classic fixed stock and that really untraditional look of the M16 compared to anything else of its day. In the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, you're like, oh yeah, that's an American GI. That rifle has proven itself, and it's still in service, right? It was designed in the 50s by a civilian, went through military trials and was adopted, but just American ingenuity and creativeness that would keep us in that kind of dominant role for decades to come because we thought differently, we did things differently, we weren't afraid to engineer and innovate. Use things like aluminum and polymer and things like that. That M16 was a departure from pretty much everything else I'm aware of its era. And you just see the silhouette of an M16 A1 or A2, or my personal favorite, the CAR 15, like the Commando, short, light, handy one. I still use the CAR 15 full auto in police work. Way up into the 2000s, I was still using it. It was a great rifle. The AR-15, there's so many different versions and models of that. I don't know. Of course, that's a direct lineage of that, and it's still like the go-to fighting rifle. But those classic M16A1s, M16A2s, which is what I went to war with when I was in the invasion of Iraq back in the early aughts, you see a silhouette of that. If you just took a picture of me carrying that thing during the war and you just blacked it out to be a straight silhouette, right? And you could see that front sight post and that carry handle, you'd be like, yeah, that's an American GI, Marine or Army infantry, something like that. You would know, right? You would know because that weapon is so iconic. You just think America. Now, there's plenty of other nations that have adopted it. Israelis use them. But when you see an Israeli with that, you know it's an American gun. Like, it's iconic American. And the fact that we have so many of those as civilians in America, granted the semi-auto version of them, but that same style, that same operating system that was designed by a civilian went to war to be used by us, by our military, but designed by a civilian. And civilians still use them and carry them and have millions of them. The same weapon. That's a beautiful thing, and I think quintessentially American, that we have that same pattern of weapon. Not exactly the same. We don't have full auto or 3-round burst or whatever generally. We can have that same operating system. You know, a veteran can go serve his country like I did overseas and then come back and use all that training and experience and similar things and still get to enjoy that and protect my community, myself, my family, my nation with that same weapon. That's a beautiful American thing. This is one that I debated. I put it on the list and I thought about taking off, but I'm going to talk about it. I think it is iconic American. It's got some haters, but that doesn't make it not iconic. Some people can't stand AR-15s, think it's like a not legit rifle. But the Mini 14, it's iconic, right? You see it in 80s TV shows, you see it in the A-Team, you see it all over. Especially for that era, which is an era that kind of shaped how I think about guns, right? The 80s and 90s. You take somebody who looks at some of the great American service rifles, classic ones, and they say, how can we scale this down and market it to civilians and make it use, we really like this cartridge that the M16 is using in modern warfare. How can we scale that and make some classic American designs and make that for an American civilian market? And I think Bill Ruger did that with the Mini 14. And not only that, but he made it, and he made it affordable to the common man. You think about, you may not realize this, but now AR-15s are fairly cheap. But at the time, you know, Colt 6920s or whatever they were at the time were fairly expensive. Bill Ruger wanted to get that same kind of semi-automatic, high-velocity, intermediate cartridge in a package the average working man would accept and afford. And I think he did that. And I think that's entrepreneurship. I think that's arming Americans. I think that's iconic American. And I think that Mini 14 kind of embodies that. And for that reason, the Mini 14, I think, should be on this list. Now, not everything has to be a military thing. Although if it's really good, the military sometimes will adopt it, as is the case with this weapon. But it was designed for civilians. Used mostly by civilians. For another great American tradition. Slaying beasts and putting meat on the table for your family. And Americans, we love to deer hunt. We hunt all kinds of other critters, but we love to deer hunt. Like, when you think of American hunting, you probably are thinking of whitetail hunting. You're probably thinking about a bolt-action rifle. You might be thinking of a lever action, but if you're thinking deer hunting, a lot of times you'll think of that bolt-action rifle. And I can think of no more iconic American bolt-action rifle than the Winchester Model 70. Winchester Model 70, the rifleman's rifle. Yeah, Carlos Hathcock, I do believe, did use one in Vietnam. It's the case again of the military looking to civilians saying, what do they have and can we adopt that to what we need? The military looking to civilians for being more effective. And that Model 70 went into service. But it was designed and used primarily by American hunters to put meat on the table. And it does it well. It's a beautiful design. It's proven its worth. It's still kind of coveted. That now the new ones are good too, but that pre-64 Winchester action is kind of renowned as being, by many people, the best action. The best sporting bolt action configuration. Controlled round feed. 3-position safety. strong, reliable, dependable, and dare I say, beautiful and iconic American. Now, I said you may also think of a lever action. And there are many great lever actions. I couldn't put them all on the list, right? I guess I could, but it'd be a really long, this would probably be a whole other podcast. I could talk for an entire episode on just the M1 Garand. But if I'm picking an iconic American lever action, Winchester gets it again. I got no loyalty to Winchester. They have this one, I think. The Winchester 94. Came out in 1894. You can still buy one today from Winchester. It's classic. The 30-30 cartridge is classic. It's been putting, again, meat on the table to feed American families. It's been used all over. It came out in the late 1800s. There were still Wild West. Came in a little bit late for the era of the Wild West. The earlier Winchesters kind of get that. But the Winchester 94, I think, embodies that. And the fact that we still use them today. They're still popular for hunting. You're likely to find one if you go into a small gun store anywhere around the country and they have a good selection of used guns. You're likely to find a Winchester 94 on the rack. Make some really fine, ornate ones, but a lot of them are just working man, putting meat on the table tools. And they're fantastic for it. Who knows the number of deer and pronghorn and elk that have been taken from a cloven hoof and put to meat on the table to feed Americans by that rifle, and how many of those rode on the saddle, right, in a scabbard, and then later rode around in the back glass of a pickup truck on dirt roads in America. Just iconic American. Like when you think about that old classic rancher riding around in an old pickup truck with something in the back glass, likely a shotgun, and you wouldn't be out of place to picture a Winchester 94 30-30. It's kind of the classic working man ranch hand rifle. And something about the West and working ranches and all that, even if you don't do it, I think you still consider it iconic American. Cowboys, lever action rifles, working man tools, which is what guns can be, right? A working man's tool. By God's grace, I've made my way in this world with a Bible and a gun as a professional gunfighter for most of my adult life, and now I'm blessed to be able to share that with you. But it's a working man's tool. That Winchester 94, there's a lot of good lever actions, but the fact that that one is still around and still used a lot for hunting and still available from Winchester says a lot about how good a weapon and a tool that rifle is. Winchester 94. Another one that really brings up images of America, I think. The revolver. Right? I don't even think we invented the revolver. I think revolvers far predate Colt. I think there were flintlocks and early like muzzle loading, black powder style revolvers. Right? But when we think about modern revolvers, that's American. That's American all the way. I doubt many places in the world you're going to walk around and see men walking around with revolvers on their hips or on their belt. You know what? You walk around Arizona, you walk around Idaho, it's not uncommon. I have a revolver in my pocket right now. I was just out doing some manual labor, make some extra money, busting concrete. Guess what I have on me? Revolver. America. I think other countries use revolvers, you know, the British Webley or whatever, but when you think of like modern revolvers, that's American. And when you think about great American revolvers, one comes to mind above all others for me. When you're thinking about America revolver, awesome. Colt Python. The Colt Python was used to keep the peace here in America for who knows how many decades. A lot of American police officers used them. It's classic 38 Special and 357 Magnum, which is, again, American cartridge all the way. A lot of police agencies around the world use things like 32 and 380. Americans, we're like, 38 Special, that's beefier, but it's not beefy enough. Let's Magnum it. Let's shove some more powder in that sucker. Let's make it more effective. The 357 Magnum is born. And then Colt comes out with what many would consider, and myself probably consider the finest double action, single action revolver. Period. Not only is it great at doing what it does, not only is it great for shooting, not only is it exquisitely accurate and just an awesome working tool for keeping the peace, it's beautiful. I mean, I did a whole episode on guns as art, beautiful guns. You talk about a beautiful gun. You look at a classic Python. Just so many things about it are beautiful. That vent rib on the top, gorgeous. The underlug, just the contours, the proportions of it, just well balanced. Just everything about that. Whether it's I know some people really love the old blued ones. I like those too, but I know me, I would destroy that thing pretty quick. Stainless ones, also beautiful. They're just a beautiful gun, and beautiful functionality, beautiful effectiveness, beautiful in so many ways, and effective, and just iconic American, the Colt Python. Another one I think of, and I think it makes the list because of my memories as a child, and I think I'm not the only one. There's probably many of you. If you didn't get into guns and shooting as an adult with the gun culture 2.0 generation, I'll call it, with the AR-15s and the Glock 19s and every gun is black, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you grew up in guns being a part of your childhood, both for fun and recreation and competition and putting food on the table, one gun was a lot of children's first real experience. And it wasn't actually my first gun, but it was one of the first guns I really had fun and really, I think, started to become a rifleman. And that is the Ruger 10/22. How many American boys learned to be responsible armed citizens with a Ruger 10/22? How many American boys like me provided meat for their family as a young boy? Probably organizations and government people would freak out if they knew how young I was running around the woods killing stuff by myself. But I did it, and I'm here, and I'm fine, and I've made a living as a gunfighter. And when I think about those memories as a child, putting meat on the table, killing things, yes, killing things, spilling blood so that I could eat, and I don't apologize for that. I grew up poor. I hunt for meat. I hunted for meat then. And the 10/22 was part of that. And it still can be part of that legacy for America. Want to make America great again? Maybe perhaps teach young men how to kill things and eat them and put food on the table. Teach them that food does not come wrapped in saran wrap and cellophane. That's not how meat comes. Cellophane is not the natural covering for meat. Skin is. Hides are. Hair is. Kill that thing. Skin it. Gut it. Cook it. And eat it. Make America great again. Teach men how to put meat on the table again. And a classic way to do that is a Ruger 10/22. And it can be fun. It's economical to shoot and train with. I still train a lot with a Ruger 10/22. And you'd think with my background, with all the guns that I have, like, why? Because it's great for that. It's great for still keeping in touch and sharpening those fundamentals. That American rifleman legacy. It can still do that, and it can do that very affordably. If you're a part of the gun culture, if you own guns and you don't own a Ruger 10/22, I don't know what to say to you. I am without speech on that. Let me just bite my tongue. But the Ruger 10/22, great gun. Just iconic American. How many young boys ran around with, and how many men still enjoy going out and shooting 10/22s. It's not just a gun for young men. It's a gun for men and women and everybody else. They are fantastic, again, tools. Just utilitarian to the utmost. Affordable, meat-gathering implements. Talk about survival, talk about preparedness. It's often high on the list. It's fantastic. Alright, let's talk about some of my favorite genre of guns, and that's the shotgun. You talk about utilitarian. Ruger 10/22 is utilitarian, but it's not as utilitarian as a shotgun. It's a 12-gauge shotgun. Right? Because I can hunt a lot of things with a 10/22, but I can do everything from hunt mourning doves to protect myself from a grizzly bear with a 12-gauge shotgun and protect my home. I used one quite a bit as a police officer. Shotguns are the working man's utilitarian tool. Much as I love my Scar 17 and my SIG 226 Legion single action only with a Trijicon RMR, and I'm very blessed to have those guns. If I could only have one gun, it'd be a 12-gauge shotgun. Why? Because it's the most useful all-around gun. Period. And you can disagree with that, but I'd ask you to back it up and prove it. Because again, I can put meat on the table and I can protect myself and my family to pretty much all reasonable defensive ranges out to 150 yards with slugs. I can hunt anything in North America, and I've done a lot of shotgun hunting. I took my biggest bear with a shotgun. Really, two stand out, and I applaud one of the patrons because I missed one, and when he said it, I was like, yeah, that should be on the list. A lot of the world has shotguns if they have a hunting culture at all in there, and I don't think we can take credit, although we make some really nice over and under and side-by-side shotguns. When you think of the classic side-by-side, you probably think British, and when you think classic over and unders, you probably think Italian, although the Brownings are made quite well. Browning Centauris, I would say, but they're not on the list. When you think of American shotguns, we really kind of pioneered it as a working man's, not an aristocratic thing, like where you wear a tweed jacket and a bowler hat and you go out and have people beat the brush for you to scare up pheasants and shoot them. Not there's anything wrong with that if you want to do that and have fun. But we as Americans see it as a common man's way to put meat on the table, which is awesome, and an affordable man's working tool. Again, John Browning comes along and he says, how can we give more firepower to the American hunter? Let's design, he designed the American autoloading shotgun, the Browning A5. When you just see that thing, talk about another gun with a remarkable silhouette. You could just show the silhouette to that. I would reckon that you could show the silhouette of a Browning A5 to the casual shotgun connoisseur, and they would say, oh, it's a Browning A5. It was so good, a lot of other companies copied it because it was that good. It was so revolutionary. An auto-loading, a semi-auto shotgun. Let's give more firepower to the American hunter. Again, it was adopted by militaries. It was used by the military, ours and other militaries, because it was so good. They looked at what civilians had and said, yeah, that's a great idea. Let's adopt that and use that. And the next one on the list, and I saddened by the state of current Remington 870s or what they've been through lately, but the Remington 870, talk about classic American. Pump action, right? Utilitarian, working man's tool. Dust, mud, snow, blood, salt water. Pfft. Don't worry about it. Got a 12-gauge pump shotgun. It'll handle it, and if it's a good one, it probably will. And one of the best, and I think just both beautiful and utilitarian. And I love shotguns, and I love a lot of different shotguns, but the Remington 870, come on. Classic American. If I have to pick one pump shotgun, it's the 870. Talk about classic American quality for a common working man. Look at an old Remington 870. Not the newer ones, the old classic ones. I would say 1990s and before. Just so well made, so robust, so utilitarian, and still beautiful. How many American men again have protected their family with and put meat on the table with an 870? How many deer and duck and who knows how many other things have gone into the bellies of Americans to make them stronger generation after generation with the Remington 870. And how many police officers, myself included as a police officer, had that thing riding next to them as a silent partner in the cruiser. Even when I was on more specialized assignments and I had access to the police armory and I could have full autos, a Tech 9 or a literal Thompson submachine gun, yeah, we had those, and full auto Car 15s, which sometimes I took out and I enjoyed. But most of the time when I was going to clear a house or something, I grabbed that Remington 870 with buckshot and slugs. Why? Best tool for the job. There was a time in America where I think as men we cared less about what looked cool on Instagram and what got the job done. And what gets the job done in most scenarios for defense, whether it be civilian or law enforcement, is a 12-gauge shotgun with buckshot. And what puts meat on the table better with all kinds of different species. And the new 18-pound rifle with all the computers and whiz-bang things and knobs and dials, is an old pump shotgun. That old Remington 870 is such a utilitarian tool, such a good value, such a classic American thing. I really enjoy the beauty of a nice English $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 side-by-side shotgun. But if I was banking on a tool to protect my family and feed myself, I'd pick up $500 old beat-up Remington 870. That's a better tool for the job. It's awesome, and it's American. Enough said on that. The last one, and this was also a Patreon pick when I posted this, and I said, hey, what'd I leave out? And they were right. It's another Colt 45, but it's not the 1911. It's the Colt Single Action Army. The Colt Single Action Army in 45 long Colt. You may know it as the Peacemaker. Even if you don't know anything about guns, you probably would recognize it if you saw John Wayne with one in a Western. Right? Cowboys, America, Old West. Yeah, Colt Single Action Army. Whether it's a really good Western, Tombstone, or the cheesiest old spaghetti Western, Colt Single Action Army. They probably weren't even the most common because they were pretty expensive at the time. Probably the old Smith & Wesson top breaks and Ivor Johnsons were probably more common. But just American quality and firepower, and just, they're beautiful, they're simple, they work, they're repeatable firepower. The Colt Peacemaker, right? When guns are that good, like the Winchester Model 70, the Rifleman's Rifle, or the Single Action Army, the Peacemaker, they kind of get their own persona, right? They kind of embody that rugged American cowboy. The Colt Single Action Army. Just, and effective too. Like the 45 Long Colt is no joke. That's no slouch of a cartridge. Especially compared to, again, what a lot of the other countries around the world were using. 45 Long Colt is a powerhouse. It's a beast. It still is. It's still an effective, hunting round. 45 Long Colt was an awesome effective round, much like the 45 ACP that came after it, which I think was kind of modeled on, we want this much power in a semi-auto when they went to the 1911. So those two things kind of tie into each other there. America, 45 Colt, Single Action Army. America, Cowboys, Old West, John Wayne, Single Action Army, America. Anyway, with that, that's going to wrap up what I have on this list. If you really disagree and think one of those was a garbage pick, or you really think there's one that should have been on there that wasn't, you can contact me at goodshepherdtraining.com. goodshepherdtraining.com. If you think, hey, I appreciate this content, it was enjoyable, it was informative, and it wasn't dirty, it wasn't filled with a bunch of sin and garbage and filth and foul language and using the Lord's name in vain and all that other garbage you get so many other places. If you appreciate that, or you appreciate my time, I'm humbled that you gave me some of your time, I really am. If you value my time and want to support the message, right? If you want to man up and support the podcast, I'd encourage you to check out Patreon. There's a lot of cool insider content on there. I'm blessed to be part of a chat where us like-minded men build each other up, right? Iron sharpens iron. I'm very blessed to be part of that group, and I don't say that half-heartedly. I don't know that those men realize how big a blessing they are in my life. They really. There's honestly days where I realize how much money I'm not making doing this compared to what I could be making doing other jobs, and I really think about, is it worth it? And then those men are just so encouraging, and there's more to life than money, right? And I really appreciate them so much, and they make such a bigger impact than they know, more than the dollar amount, because the patrons do contribute, right? There's a reason I'm doing this full time. Instead of you getting a couple episodes a year, you get one a lot. Between Gunfighter Life and Alpha Male Podcasts and the flagship Simple Man Sermons, you've the majority of the time been getting an episode a day. If you want to support that and continue that and help out, again, Patreon, there should be a link in the show notes, or just go to goodshepherdtraining.com, goodshepherdtraining.com. There's a link on there. Enough about that. Tactical tip of the day. We talked about a lot of classic guns today. Tactical tip of the day, Ballistol. especially if you like the smell of black licorice, which I do. Ballistol is not only great on gun metal and good for a lot of things, it's also great on wood and leather, which a lot of these classic guns are going to have. It's great for preserving wood and leather. And guess what? Great for a lot of other stuff too. It's even great for cleaning wounds. So if you want something multifunctional to put in your kit, if you're a prepper or a survivalist, which I am, and I don't apologize for that, a little thing of ballistol, a little metal jar of ballistol, reusable. It's good for keeping guns lubricated and cleaned and protected. It's also good for wound cleaning. It's good for all kinds of stuff. And it smells fantastic. Trying to pick up a girl at a bar, first of all, don't do that. Probably not the place you want to meet your future wife. I could be wrong. There could be decent girls at bars. I'm so thankful I don't have to date anymore. But if you are, maybe take a splash of that and just rub it on your neck. You know, that jet overpowering black licorice scent just yells alpha male. Maybe mix it with some garlic. Again, it's a multifunctional thing here. Ballistol. Classic. It is not American, it is German, but if you want a way to protect and preserve guns and leather and wood and treat wounds and all kinds of other useful stuff, you can look up all kinds of uses for ballistol. Anyway, ballistol, it's awesome. Smells great. With that, the tactical verse of the day. Talked about America and making it great again. There's a time when we prided ourselves, I think, on being a Judeo-Christian nation, following Judeo-Christian values. There's a blessing for that in the Bible. Deuteronomy 28, it's one of my favorite passages. Now it shall come to pass, if you diligently obey the voice of the Lord your God, to observe carefully all his commandments which I command you today, that the Lord your God will set you high above all nations of the earth, and all these blessings shall come upon you and overtake you, because you obey the voice of the Lord your God. Blessed shall you be in the city, and blessed shall you be in the country. Blessed shall be the fruit of your body, the produce of your ground, and the increase of your herds, the increase of your cattle, and the offspring of your flocks. Blessed shall be your basket and your kneading bowl. Blessed shall you be when you come in, and blessed shall you be when you go out. The Lord will cause your enemies who rise against you to be defeated before your face. They shall come out against you one way, and flee before you 7 ways. The Lord will command the blessings on you in your storehouses and all to which you set your hand, and he will bless you in the land which the Lord your God is giving you. The Lord will establish you as a holy people to himself, just as he swore to you. If you keep the commandments of the Lord your God and walk in his ways, then all the people of the earth shall see that you are called by the name of the Lord, and they shall be afraid of you. And the Lord will grant you plenty of goods in the fruit of your body, in the increase of your livestock, and the produce of your ground, in the land which the Lord swore to your fathers to give you. The Lord will open to you his good treasure, the heavens, to give rain to your land in season, and bless all the work of your hand. You shall lend to many nations, but you shall not borrow. And the Lord will make you the head and not the tail. You shall be above only, and not be beneath, if you heed the commandments of the Lord your God, which I command you today, and are careful to observe them. So you shall not turn aside from any of the words which I command you this day, to the right or to the left, to go after other gods and serve them. And it continues with the bad things that happen if you don't obey God. And I would say, as a nation, if we want to be great again, we have to be godly again, and we have to turn back to God and follow God and serve God and submit to God, and in turn be blessed by God. With that, thanks for listening, and have a blessed day.